Congress passes war power measures for first time, rebuking Trump's war with Iran. The Republican-controlled U.S. Senate has approved a measure instructing President Donald Trump to halt the war in Iran or seek congressional approval before continuing military action. A handful of Republicans joins Democrats in a 50-48 vote on Tuesday, marking a bipartisan show of disapproval of the war. Let me guess, Susan Collins wants to win an election. The same measure was passed by the U.S. House of Representatives in June, where 4 Republicans joined every Democrat to approve it, 215-8. But the resolution is largely symbolic because even after passing both chambers of Congress, it will not be sent to Trump for his consideration and does not carry the force of the law. The vote marks the first time that both chambers of Congress have approved a concurrent resolution instructing a president to end military action since the War Powers Resolution of 1973 was enacted. Its passage is significant because it adds to the pressure the White House is facing to find an end to the Iran war, as petrol prices have spiked and public opposition to the war has increased. Did we lose the war? Let's ask this question honestly and openly. Let's not try to attach any emotions to it. Let's not, how bad that might feel, any impact that might have on America's image, any impact that might, let's just rationally break down as this continues to undermine Trump's leverage in negotiations. If he wanted to be able to go out and actually convince the Iranians that he will go a second round of fighting after the 60-day memorandum of understanding negotiation period had elapsed, the most likely outcome is that they extend that period. Not that Trump decides at the end of 60 days to let loose. Not only because of this, which again is largely symbolic, but because the midterms will be right around the corner. Now, if the deal is bad enough, there is a possibility that Trump will pull the trigger if, say, it's even worse than the deal that, Obama was able to negotiate with the Iranians when it comes to the amount of, gains the United States actually got. Maybe if there is still no sunset, there's a sunset provision in it or something along those lines, then maybe. But if he does, that means going into a midterm with that war raging and possibly continuing to see energy prices that had just been, largely speaking, somewhat brought under control. Not completely, but somewhat, maybe 60%, maybe 40%, something in that range, to then send the Iranians into a tizzy, firing into the strait, bunkering down the hatches, and then possibly asking the Houthis to fire into their area of expertise, blocking down the Suez Canal, which could make the crisis possibly maybe even worse than what it was before. I'm not saying they're going to do that. I'm just saying that these are not impossibilities. And so Trump, under the consideration, while he's considering starting the war again, he's going to think about these things. He's going to think about the Suez. He's going to think about the Strait of Hormuz. He's going to think about more U.S. soldiers dying, more than the 12 that have already died. He's going to think about the amount of PAC-2 and PAC-3 interceptors they have. They're going to think about the amount of THAAD interceptors they have for ballistic missile strikes. They're going to think about how much this has cost them. He's going to think about the polling, and he's going to think about the election, and he's ultimately going to think about how this is going to affect the world economy. And so Trump might be in a position after 60 days where he feels he can only extend it if he wants to retain some political flexibility and not expend even more of America's, munition stockpiles, which we've already expended quite a significant amount during the process of this war. So, when trying to judge where we are with the Memorandum of Understanding, we need to judge it based upon what Trump said were the goals of this war, what we're going for at the start. That's how it's traditionally done. Mind you, Trump is a strange cat. And sometimes Trump is going out there saying everything in the world, hoping he can get something. And so if Trump goes into a diner and he says, I want everything. I want everything for free. I want XYZ. I want the 5-course meal. I want the wine. I want the steak. I want the mushroom cream soup. I want the everything. And then someone says, we can give you some saltine crackers. Some people could say that's a win because it was his bullishness on wanting everything for free that got him saltine crackers for free. Others might refer to the fact that everybody else in the restaurant's also getting saltine crackers for free. That there might also be a JCPOA. There might have also been another deal without a war, without dead American soldiers, without this immense cost to the American taxpayer, both in taxes and in costs at the pump. Not to mention, like, general, like, economic stability to the free transit of goods internationally, which is an, part of America's global economic stability, what it's underpinned by. So I would say you could try to judge this on Trump math of was anything grabbed, period, therefore it's a win, get fucked. But I don't think that's how we should judge any politician or any war goal. If someone says, my goal is to take this city and you don't take it, it has to be judged that way. And so let's judge it by what he said. Regime change. That has not been achieved. Now, there is a compromise that is put forward by the Trump administration saying, well, there was a regime and there were changes. Regime change. That would be like, I don't know, you got a tire and you say, I need a tire change. You come up and you slashed it and you say, well, it was a tire and now it has changed by me slashing your tire. I did a tire change. Like I like that's the logic. It doesn't work. It does not work. It's all semantic games. It's not regime change to replace one Ayatollah Khomeini with another Ayatollah Khomeini, to fight 20 years to replace one Taliban with another Taliban. You could say, well, it's not the same Taliban leader. Well, it's not exactly the same Khomeini, but it's still an Ayatollah. It's still the Taliban. Like, you can't remove yourself from that fact that the regime that was in Afghanistan before is now the regime that is in Afghanistan after. The regime that was in Iran before America started bombing is the regime that was in there after. If that's the case, then the Ayatollah dying, just like he dies Elvis style on the toilet, that is regime change. If Trump was to die tomorrow and JD Vance was to become vice president, as is the routine, as is the function of the system, that would be regime change. When I think of regime change, I think of de-Ba'athification. When I think of regime change, I think of replacing all of, the top ranking Nazi officials, having like the ideological cleansing of the state. Like I think of, the period that followed post-World War II in Japan. This is what I think of when I think of regime change. I do not think somebody died and we replaced one official, or a lot of officials died and we replaced them with more radical officials. Okay? I'm sorry, but like, you didn't get a different Al-Qaeda just because one guy died and was replaced. There's a lot that needs to happen structurally and ideologically for it to actually have been a change. So I would say for the goal of regime change, we have not succeeded. So that's one. Two, ballistic missiles. We have not succeeded. And I think the clearest indication of this is Trump at the start talked about limiting and destroying and bringing down their ballistic missiles. And now when Trump is asked about their ballistic missiles, he says, well, other countries have them. He talks about it as if, well, of course, Iran has ballistic missiles. Like before, it was, how dare they? And now it's, of course they. So I would say that when it comes to the ballistic missile arsenal, no progress. You might have destroyed a factory, but if they get the $300 billion that Trump is talking about, whether financed directly by the United States or through third parties, some of that money will be put into rebuilding military assets, including factories like ballistic missile factories, like drone factories. Okay, so I don't think when it comes to ballistic missiles that there has been a success. Proxies. No. While some proxies might have lost faith in the exact strength of the Iranian government, others have probably gained some confidence in the resilience, if not their ability to project power everywhere they'd like to, maybe their ability to survive the bombardments and still, if all goes the way that they probably wanted to go, and still be able to maintain some smuggling routes to the Houthis, to the, to Hezbollah, to militias in Iraq. And Hezbollah still exists. Hamas still exists. The Houthis still exist. And the militias in Iraq still exist. So when it comes to funding the proxies, the Iranians are still funding the proxies. You might argue about how much money they have now to fund proxies, but again, if you're getting them $300 billion, you free up $1 for a different dollar to go be sent up to the proxies. Even if this money is invested in hospitals, that will free up other money to go do other things. That is likely. So I would say when it comes to the proxies, no. When it comes to getting a better deal than Barack Obama did, that's to be determined. I mean, they're getting a large cash payment, larger than what was unfrozen. So I would say, considering this is the United States organizing funds for the Iranians instead of just unfreezing funds, and it's a larger amount of money, I would say that actually could be considered maybe worse than the Obama deal. Outside of the fact that no Americans had to die in open combat in order to get the Obama deal. So I don't know. I mean, like, it depends on whether or not there's a sunset provision. That's one thing that it could improve upon in comparison to the Obama deal. And I think that's probably one of the more likely scenarios, because that's probably an area where the Trump administration could pick up one of its easiest victories if the Iranians want to give that up. Whether it comes to inspections, whether they will be, warningless inspections, the breadth of the inspections, all of this is supposed to be negotiated in the next 60 days. So that, whether that will be better or even what we need to probably expect on par with the Obama deal, we have to wait for the next 60 days and likely longer due to the nature of for how long these negotiations take, how these negotiations tend to go, how removing Iran from the pressure cooker of American military action could actually remove some of the physical power that might have pushed them to make or accepted a deal that they otherwise would not. I'm unconvinced that it's better than the Obama deal until we see something on the sunset provision, until we see something about inspections. I'm unconvinced it's even to the standards of the Obama deal. And it certainly cost a lot more to the American taxpayers and to the American people in blood than the Obama deal. And if we're talking about that as the starting line, since Trump tore up the Obama deal, and as for the comparison of what Trump's trying to get, very uncertain about that not looking like a loss. And then lastly, and of course most importantly, Iran's atomic stockpile, Iran's nuclear arsenal, Iran's pathway to an atomic bomb, the big one. We've gotten no closer than we were with the JCPOA. Everything that I've seen touted as an achievement is stuff that we could have had without the war or we had previously. Okay. If we get the inspections, we had inspections before. We had that. Iran publicly said they will not strive for a nuclear weapon. That's been their stated policy for decades. So that's not an achievement. You just got the Iranians to say what they've been saying for decades. They said that during Obama. They said that during both Bushes. They've said that during Clinton. They said that during Biden, and they say that during both Trump terms. So you can't really use that as a signifier that you've made progress, that we've made some big leap and bound if they're saying the same thing. Because the Iranians, I know this is a possibility that might shock some people at home. They know this tactic. It's really devious. It's really sneaky, okay? You got to really look out for it. It's called lying, where you just say things that aren't true. And they have the ability to do it too. Just because the Iranians said that they will no longer strive for an atomic bomb doesn't mean anything. To them, lying about that is going to mean a lot less than, say, blowing up their supreme religious leader. Thank you for the $5. I appreciate that. Maybe if Trump wore a tan suit, people would forget about this whole thing. I would advise you to add the president on Truth Social and get that to him right away. Please. Action must be taken. So when it comes to that aspect of the deal, we haven't seen any progress. To this idea of them declaring something. When it comes to the idea of their enriched material, Trump said at the start of this, as a comparison to the Obama deal, something he wanted better. I don't want them to give up their material to a third-party country, enriched material. Their enriched material has to be given up to the United States. Well, the Iranians have not agreed to give their enriched material up to the United States, and we have yet to see them actually give their enriched material to a third-party country, or agree which third-party country they would even necessarily give the enriched material to that the United States would be satisfied with. Because if it was the Russians or the Chinese, I doubt you're going to get Marco Rubio to tell the president of the United States, that's good, go ahead with that. And that's another thing. Enriched material is another layer here. Enriched material is another layer. See, before this war started, the news was that the Iranians offered to blend their material and bring it down to an enrichment level of 3.67%, which is very similar to what was being discussed during the Obama administration with the JCPOA, otherwise known as the Iran deal. And that was offered again right before Trump started the bombing operation with the Israelis, as the Iranians tried to stop a bombing operation because they didn't know how it would go. They didn't know if the regime would be toppled. They didn't know, they obviously didn't want their Ayatollah to be blown up. So they offered a deal. And the deal that they offered was to blend their material down and to put it down to 3.7%. They would still have a civilian program. They would still have enriched material. They would still, operate with nuclear scientists and have a program. It would just not be an atomic weapons program, allegedly. And they would have enrichment levels down to something that is more similar to a civilian program instead of a military program, because there's no reason for enriched material to be enriched past 3.67% unless you wanted to make a weapon. That was offered a few days before the war started. That deal obviously was not taken because the war did begin. The bombing did, fire upon Iran, and the rest is history. So if we're now going to get something back to, well, how about we blend the material and you go down to a civilian and, atomic program, then how is it not just you're taking the deal you were offered before after we've expended a bunch of materials that we didn't need to get the same deal? So if that's the deal we end up getting after 60 days, 90 days, 120 days, 150 days, however long this negotiated period lasts, then we're just getting the deal we could have gotten for no casualties, for no deadly, horrible war, for no blown up schools, no dead American soldiers, and no regional destruction and economic chaos, no increased gas prices. You could have gotten the deal and avoided the war. But because it would have looked possibly too similar to Barack Obama's Iran deal, because they got to keep their enriched material, and because they didn't hand it directly over the United States, that was not the deal taken. Trump thought he could get better. The Israelis tried to convince them of that. They seemed to have some success. The war began, and the rest is history. So if you're being offered a better deal before, possibly better deal, we don't know until the 60 days, 90 days is up. Until we see what that final deal is, all of this has a big asterisk. All of this has a big question mark. but it leaves you wondering, could we have not gotten a deal that was good enough for no American casualties without the war? And if war is an extension of politics, that is what I would have called something resembling an American victory. Because expending all these materials, no matter how much damage was done to the Iranian Navy, no American was scared that the Iranian Navy was going to attack them off the coast of California. No matter how much destruction might have been done to air defense systems, how much destruction is done to the Air Force, how many old aircraft from the Shah's era that was destroyed on the runway, no matter how many of these types of strikes we might have conducted, the goal was a political one that we have yet to achieve. And if we do not achieve it, which I think right now is unlikely we're going to achieve, ballistic missile program, that seems to be off the table. That we can just write off as a loss. We did not achieve that. Getting rid of the regime, a loss. Okay, well, proxies, a loss. Costing the Iranians, degrading them. This wasn't even necessarily a reason, but became a justification as the war went on and the other objectives weren't achieved. Well, maybe until you give them $300 billion and they use that to rebuild in those areas. Then it's the question of like a temporary victory to a mid-range law. I don't know. I mean, when it comes to all of the metrics by which Trump started the war, outside of the continued question mark of the atomic weapons arsenal, the arsenal they're striving for, those are all losses. And so really, the entirety of this being able to be presented as any sort of victory for the United States seems to completely hinge upon whether or not the United States government can make them agree to give up any capacity to pursue an atomic weapon, whether that means Trump's earlier demand to hand over their enriched material or something stronger than the JCPOA. But if we just get the JCPOA again, or we get something that's like NAFTA 2.0, which is just NAFTA with some bells and whistles, then this entire war was pointless. We should have just accepted the earlier deal, even if it looked a little bit like Obama. Obama is not the antithesis of American foreign policy objectives.